Do you remember the first time you had any interaction with art or where that kind of spark was for you?
It must have been when I was very, very young. It was not the first interaction with art. I can't really remember because I grew up in a very art-oriented family. My mom is a classical singer, so I grew up in the theater. I was in different theaters in the Netherlands where I grew up every other week or so, and I just loved being surrounded by creative people. And I also grew up going to galleries and museums, and there was something about people talking about artists and their lives that a spark came and
makes you feel a little electric sometimes.
Yeah, and it was just so fascinating and a different world than the world that I knew. And yeah, especially New York in the 20th century and all of those stories about the factory where Andy Warhol's house, where he would invite actresses and photographers and they would all come together and have this community, this creative community. And I've always been very drawn to that.
I love listening to stories about art like that. That's kind of, like you said with the factory, where you know it happened because it was so recent, but it still feels like this tall tale of history. And that's where I feel like art history, it sounds so cheesy, but it really does come alive because you can kind of see it, if that makes sense.
It really does. And just all of these relationships and this story how Leo Castelli, which is a very famous gallerist, he was doing a studio visit with Rauschenberg. They were going to sign an agreement for a solo show. And he was like, oh, I'm going to pop open some wine. But I don't have a corkscrew. But my friend Jasper has one. Went downstairs, Leo Castelli followed him. Then he saw Jasper Johns's art. And that's when his career took off. So he got actually a solo show before Rauschenberg did at Leo Castelli's gallery. And it's just conversations like this. Like these artists were living together. They
literally,
like in the same building, they were friends and they were like feeding their works feed into each other. And when you know that, it's just so much more interesting.
No, I totally feel you. And actually there's this show that I saw on Netflix recently. It's called Transatlantic.
Okay.
The show is about all sorts going on at that time during World War II, but there's this kind of subplot. And I haven't finished it, so don't worry about spoilers. Yeah. But there's this like subplot of some of the surrealists and the artists that were working in the Paris in the 20th century. Basically, there's all these artists that had to escape, right? In this show, they're so low-key about it, but Max Ernst is like throwing parties, like they're talking about some guy named Salvador as if it's just nothing, and all of a sudden, like, some woman named Peggy shows up. And then they're just like, oh, Mrs. Guggenheim, like, what are you going to be doing when you get back to New York City? And I was watching it, being someone that clearly loves art very much, but had no idea that I was watching this show where it's like her and Max Ernst, that's where in the show they kind of had them start dating or whatever. And I was just like, hold up. This actually really did happen. Yeah. And it kind of inspired me to start looking into a little bit more. And I think it was about the time that I watched that show that I really started to look for my own context rather than just looking at art, big picture. I love those stories.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's when you study art history, part of it are these stories, but there's of course so much technical information, but this, like the artists' lives, how they influenced each other, how their careers got to the point, why certain artists are famous and deemed important, and I mean there's so much more that goes into it, but it's fascinating to learn about that.
Because you studied art history, right?
I did.
So how did you get into art?
So always loved art. There was always a stack of book about artists and art history next to my bed growing up.
Genuine joy for it.
Yeah. I just absolutely loved it. If we would be on a city trip, I would wake up early with my dad to go to a museum. Like I was that kid.
Yeah, same.
Even though I had such a big passion for art, I didn't start with studying art history right away after high school. I studied law first.
Bit of a jump there.
Yep, which I absolutely hated.
I could see that coming in your expression. I was going to say, how much did you absolutely love it?
Oh my God, my brain is just not made for that. My brain would shut off. Like during lectures, I would have to force myself not to fall asleep. It was terrible.
We've all been there.
No, it was really not for me. So after a little bit over a year, I quit. I dropped out and followed my dream and enrolled at the University of Amsterdam to study art history, which was amazing but very academic. So even though you would really touch about artists' lives and the technical aspects, there's a lot of memorizing art. So images of art, and then just the title, the creator, the date it was made, the medium, just facts.
Yeah.
And just like hundreds at a time.
It sounds like it could be a bit numbing to the joy of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you are interested in more modern and contemporary art and you start 3,000 years before Christ. Oh. It takes a long time before you got to
Big lead up.
Yeah. But still, I really enjoyed it. And I still really... it has so many perks to study art history if you work in the art world. Just to have that context, and not all of the information that I studied is relevant and can say that I remember it all. Yeah. But it's very nice to have this broad understanding of what all came before.
Yeah. So context is the important takeaway from
studying it. Yeah. And just learning how to research and approach arts.
Yeah. That's interesting because I didn't study art history. I studied business because that was something that I thought would be better to force myself to study, because it does interest me. Like I was interested in marketing and all that kind of stuff. Still am, but I knew that if I didn't make myself study it, I would have a hard time doing that. But with art or something more creative, I was going to do it anyway, so I didn't bother. And I think for me that worked out really well. But now that I've been working in art, I've ended up naturally kind of coming to a place of looking for context myself.
Yeah, which you can definitely do.
Yeah, and you're always going to be looking for more. You know what I mean? There's always going to be a new artist. There's always going to be something like... I could rattle off a ton of artist names right now, but there's still probably 700 trillion bajillion more. You know, like the chance of someone naming an artist or a gallery, museum or whatever tomorrow that I've never heard of is extremely high, as it is for most people.
Yeah,
you know?
And also for art historians and also for art history professors. And there's so much
stops
out there. It never stops. Yeah,
exactly. So would you say that you actually use your degree?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. You're one of the lucky ones.
Because I have to research art quite a bit. Whenever I make a show, I go to the artist studio and we really go into their practices very deeply, and it helps to understand their work a lot. But it's not that you need to learn those concepts at university. Yeah. But it really helps, yeah. Yeah,
because you have, like, structure's good, I think, especially when you're trying to learn how to do something. Even though some of it kind of sucks, like you have to push through. Yeah. But there's always ways to learn yourself. I think I'm learning a lot myself. I've learned a lot formally, informally. Like, it's very subjective to the person, I find. But I do sometimes daydream about art history classes. But then I hear people say that they're numbing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
No, I mean, there's so much you can learn from books. Yeah. And YouTube. And podcasts.
There we go. I honestly learn a lot, like when I'm doing research for my content stuff. Yeah. Because if there's an artist or there's a new show and I know it looks really cool, and I want to learn a bit more, so I'll go and I'll look around and think like, okay, this is great, and I want to share it with people just because I had that instant natural spark of excitement. I'll do a deep dive into the artist, find out cool stuff about them, and I learn in the process, share with other people in the process, and I think like, there's my art history degree.
Yeah,